Okay, let's start now. Welcome to ANU Indonesia Project Global Seminar. My name is Arianto Patundru and I'm hosting this program with Nur Kemala Mulyani or Nuke. We acknowledge the first Australians and pay our respects to elders past, present, and emerging. We are grateful for the support from the Australian National University and the Australian Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade. Today's webinar is special as we are launching our third series. Since March 2020, we have been running a series on COVID-19 in Indonesia. And late last year, we launched a series on gender equality and social inclusion, or GESI. And today, our third series is starting, and it is on climate change. I would like to also announce that Nur Kemala Mulyani, has moved to another office. So this would be her last hosting with me of the Indonesia Project webinars. And on behalf of the Indonesia Project, I would like to thank Nuke for her tremendous support for our activities and congratulate her for her new position. Nuke, are you there? Can I invite you to say a few words?
Thank you, Acho. Thank you so much. It has been an honor for me to host the Global Seminar Series for the last 2 years. Thank you to everyone who has been supporting this program. And I look forward to attending this program from the other side of the screen and not to have to worry about the things that, go behind organizing a seminar. And all the very best to Acho and the team. And hopefully this program will go from strength to strength. Thanks, Acho. Thanks.
Thank you, Nuke. So now back to our seminar. So we are very fortunate to have Ibu Kuki Soejachmoen from Indonesia Research Institute for Decarbonization and Professor Budy Resosudarmo here from ANU to kick off this new series. Their topic today is Indonesia's energy challenges and climate change. Ibu Kuki is the Executive Director of IRID, Indonesia Research Institute for Decarbonization. She was previously with the President's Special Envoy for Climate Change in Indonesia. And Pak Budy, of course, is an economics professor here at the ANU with research focusing on economic development as well as resource and environmental economics. Today, Ibu Kuki will discuss Indonesia's energy policies and the progress in the context of COP26. And Pak Budy will zoom in to the aspects of transforming the economy from reliance on non-renewables to renewables with a focus on electricity sector. And as usual, we will have Q&A session after the talks. But if you want, you can always write your question on the Q&A box, and we will attend to them in the Q&A session. Please also kindly fill a little polling when it appears on your screen, because we need this to improve our series. So without further ado, let me first invite Ibu Kuki to present her research. Silakan, Mbak Kuki.
All right, thank you so much, Mas Acho. Good morning, everyone from Jakarta, and good afternoon. I think it's in Australia. So thank you for having me for today's session, and I'm really honored to be in the first session of the new series of discussion in Indonesia project. So I think without further ado, I would like to share some views on what happened in Indonesia after the COP in Glasgow and what has been happening from then until now. So let me share my screen. All right. So I don't have much slides, and I hope this will trigger some conversation later. So it's basically as Acho already mentioned that the topic is more on Indonesian climate target and also energy transition, because we know that for any countries we cannot delink the two, right? Because if we are talking about climate target, we are talking about emission reduction, greenhouse gases emission, then it has a lot to do with the energy sector as well. So just to start with, in July last year, Indonesia submitted two documents to the UNFCCC Secretariat. And those documents are the first one, the updated NDC. And then the second one is basically this long-term strategy. So there is in Article 4 of the Paris Agreement, the last paragraph saying that each country are encouraged basically to send and to share their strategy for low emission development for the longer term. So this is what Indonesia submitted last July as well. Just some remarks on those two documents. The first one is that in the updated NDC, basically there is no change on the target itself. So both the scope as well as the number, I mean like the percentage of the emission reduction being targeted are still the same. But there are more detailed information on the adaptation side of the NDC, because as we know, Indonesia's NDC is basically have, you know, like two main part. The first one is the target on the mitigation, and the other one is on the target on adaptation. So it's basically to keep the economy, to keep the ecosystem to be able to adapt to the impact of climate change. And then the second document, as I mentioned earlier, is the long-term strategy for low carbon and climate resilience. Okay, there is no strategy at the end. I missed that one. So okay, the document is long-term strategy for low carbon and climate resilience 2050. And in that, specifically, I will just mention about the mitigation part of the documents, right? So there are three scenarios being used to basically to project what will happen in Indonesia in 2050. The first one is the extended unconditional commitment of NDC. So it's basically NDC because Indonesian NDC is up to 2030, the same as most of other countries. So the first scenario is basically extending it to 2050. So the same scenario all the way to 2050. And then the second one have some transition. And then the third one is a low carbon scenario that is compatible with the Paris Agreement target. So the third one is basically the most, how do you call it, progressive and ambitious one. And in that scenario, there are two key messages that we can get. The first one is to reach peaking in 2030. And this will, why is it the peaking? Because then at that time, the forestry and land use sector will be net sink. So rather than net emitter, it is expected by 2030 that it become a net sink. So it means that the role in absorbing greenhouse gases emission is bigger than the one that being emitted by the sector. And then the second one, of course, as already also basically mentioned and discussed in the international arena, it is talking about, and this is also part of the Paris Agreement itself, that there is a need to have like a net zero emission globally in the in the second half of the century. So in this case, then Indonesia choose the net zero emission to be in 2060 or sooner. And as we know, for having net zero emission, then we need, of course, to balance both emission and also the absorption. So for a country with a heavy emission from energy as well as a big role of forest and land use, then we need to balance the two. From the energy sector, definitely we have to have a transformational changes in the energy system. But we need also to do a lot in the land use, and it has a lot to do also with the food system. And of course, like this will have quite a number, or need quite a number of trade-off between the two. So just to show you how the things are. So this is basically the Indonesian emissions, the greenhouse gases emissions in Indonesia in 2030, according to our NDC target. So if you see here, for example, the business as usual, the 2030, the up one is the business as usual, and we can see that the role of energy, or the share of energy emission, is like 58%, and the role of forest and land use will be around 25%, and the rest will be other sectors, which basically IPPU industry, IPPU waste management, and agriculture related activities. But when we reduce our emission to achieve our unconditional NDC, then the role of energy will be bigger, because there will be more focus and more activities targeted in the forest and land use sector, as well as other sectors, because we know that, for example, IPPU, the process of industry, the waste management will have also quite a big contribution in reducing emission. And this is also the case if we do further. So it's not only unconditional, but also getting support from international community, getting cooperation with other international community. Then Indonesia is committed to reduce its emission from 29% up to 41%. And in this situation, then we can see also that the role of energy, or the contribution of energy, is even getting bigger compared to the other scenarios. So if we see the 41%, then it is somehow aligned with the net sink target in 2030 as well. So as Acho already mentioned earlier, and based on our communication earlier, I was expected to share what happened in the energy sector in Indonesia, because as I mentioned, FOLU is one thing, and there are we have been doing a lot in this forestry and land use sector. So we need to go further, and we need, first of all, definitely as a country that is still doing the development, then we need energy. The second one, we cannot, basically, it's a fact that fossil-based energy will emit carbon dioxide and other carbon emissions. So we need to, in a way, still doing our development with less emission. So it's decoupling development and emission. So what we need is basically definitely to reduce the role of fossil, or to have less emission from the fossil based energy. But as already mentioned also by the Indonesian Ministry of the Minister of Energy and Mineral Resources in Glasgow. So basically, Indonesia is looking forward to have, net zero emission, especially in the energy and focusing in the electricity sector in 2060. And as you can see here, there are already stages and, time frame of what will happen for every 5 years, basically. So for example, The target for 2025 is a certain emission reduction. The target in 2030 is basically the target of the, how do you call it, the NDC for energy sector, and so on all the way until 2060. And as you can see here, there are a number of interventions needed, both from supply side as well as from the demand side. So it's not only how we provide energy, but also how we consume energy, so that we can basically do the transition from fossil-based to a cleaner and renewable energy. So what are the challenges? So what are the challenges for having this energy transition? The first one, and this is also mentioned by the Indonesian, for the G20, there is an energy transition working group. So during their launching last week, they also mentioned these are basically the issues that need to be tackled. The first one is access to energy, to ensure energy security, basically. The second one will be access to clean energy technology. And the third one will be financing for this energy transition. So if we are talking about the access to energy, then we know, at least for Indonesia, there are still areas that has, if I can say, limited access to energy, right? So how to address that areas with energy poverty? We need to give them access to energy. The question is also, if we need to give them access, can we ensure that using renewable energy can be cheaper than using fossil fuels or fossil-based energy? So this is the issue of the right energy pricing. And I think the economic professor, Budy, will be able to share with us more on these issues. But I think for me, coming from like the climate and maybe more on climate and energy side, then the issue is internalizing the externalities. Because what happened now, for example, for fossil-based energy, we just take it for granted, right? Basically, we don't consider the externalities in the price of that kind of energy. So I think the issue is how to have at least comparing apple to apple for both the renewable as well as the fossil-based one. And if we are talking about the clean access to clean energy technology, so how is the access to the right, the safe, and the environmental sound technologies? Maybe if you remember the slide before, I just show you here. There is a plan to have, for example, nuclear power generation somewhere along the line, if I'm not mistaken, from 2036, 2040 to the end of this timeline. So the question is, what are the right technology? What are the safe and at the same time environmentally sound technologies? And then the second question, talking about the access to technology, is are we going to be just a market? Because quite a lot of technology coming from outside the country, right? And then the third one is on financing of energy transition. We know that the government budget will not be sufficient. So the question is, what are other sources of finance? And having energy transition will also give implications to any country, to any region. The first one definitely is cost for transition. So if we are talking about cost for transition, it's not as simple as if I can say, as simple as investment for renewable based energy system development. But I think what is even more difficult to address and more tricky is the cost for phasing down and eventually phasing out coal and other fossil-based energy. This is something that sometimes we forget, that transitioning from one thing to another, a new one, will need intervention in both. So we need to address both sides. And then the second point is access to technology. I think if we are talking about the price of technology itself, then we can have like a global price, right? It's more or less the same. But the question then, I remember some times ago, there was a question from one of the high officers in Indonesia in the energy sector. Why renewable energy is still expensive in Indonesia? This is not the technology per se, not the price of the technology per se, but also what is it that like incentive and support from the government, so that the one that come to invest in renewable can also have additional support rather than bringing all the things by him or herself. And then I think the second issues that is quite challenging for Indonesia is the issue of TKDN. So it's domestic component for any technology. It is good that we want to have that domestic component, but I think at the very early stage where we don't have the industry, it is difficult to have or to set a high proportion of the domestic component. So the question is technology cooperation the answer? Because right now, if we have this technology cooperation, then we can start from R&D for a certain technology, and then the business or the industry can be based in Indonesia, and of course then we can have like workplaces and so on, and this will be considered as domestic component, right? So if the issue is only to have a new or technology imported, then we won't be able to fulfill that part, the domestic component. While we cannot start with a high percentage of domestic component if there is no certainty about the market itself. And then the third one is on human resources. Again, as I mentioned, transitioning is from one point to another. So what happened with the one that we basically left out, right? So what happened with, in this case, for example, the fossil-related industry? What happened with the workforces from there? But then we also transitioning to something new. So what is the readiness? How we can, let's say, have a good both in quantity as well as quality of human resources to ensure the deployment of new appropriate technology. And what are needed, I think it sounds cliche, but it is something that we really need. The consistency, of course, consistency of policy and regulation. This has been issues, I think, not only in Indonesia, but anywhere. The intersectors consistency is one thing. So sometimes you have different sectors having different target or not different, but contradicting policy, regulations, and targets. So we need to work on that. And on the other hand, we need a long-term consistency of policy and regulations as well. The second point will be financing, of course. The financial mechanism, we know government budget will not be enough, so we need private investment, but we also need international funding. So how to have a good or the most appropriate mechanism for financing of this energy transition in Indonesia. And then the third, I think this is, I put it the last one, but it is the most important part of it, because if we want to have an energy transition, then we need to have a just and affordable energy transition. So it means that a just for the whole population, and also affordable, because if it is too expensive for the community, but also for those that being in the business, then we cannot have a sustainable one, right? So for the human resources, to have a just transition, especially from the human resources point of view, then we need a certain of training and education to be able to shift from the old one to the new one. And also we need a new workplaces that the one from the, in this case, from the fossil related industries can work in that new workplaces, basically with the skills and the education, the knowledge that they have. So as we know it, that if we are talking about human resources, about workforces, then there are a number of how do you call it, levels, from unskilled all the way to the very specific skilled and educated one. So we need to find a way to address that job loss from the old situation to the new one. So I think that would be the end of my presentation, Acho. Would be happy to answer and be in the discussion later. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mbak Kuki, for a very comprehensive overview. And I think that provides a good segue to Pak Budy's analysis on the economic transformation. So let me invite Mas Budy to start his presentation. Go ahead, Mas.
Yeah, thank you, Acho, for the opportunity to present some of my work. And thank you, Kuki, for a nice presentation explaining Indonesian policies related to climate change. And my presentation will be just part of Kuki's topics, which is focused on the energy transformation in Indonesia. However, the way that I define energy transformation is a bit broad compared to those who are working in climate change per se. So this presentation is a summary of several works together with friends. Many of them are in Indonesia, such as Arif Yusuf, Joni, Ditya, and Juventus. So let's look at the history and to understand the burden of Indonesia energy sector, which is related to energy security and climate change. So in general, Indonesia going back quite okay after the crisis. Yeah, in average, GDP has been growing approximately 5%. Yes, we have a COVID, but if you look at the latest trend, it is going to that direction as well. However, the growth is accompanied by an increasing demand of energy. So this is the general energy. And in particular, the demand on electricity, which is growing higher than the GDP. And in around 2003, there has been kind of a panic at the time because in Indonesian energy sector has been mainly based on oil and gas, and there is an increasing trend of net import, which is Indonesia basically net export decline, and that is creating a fiscal pressure because we subsidize the the electricity and energy sector, and also creating an issue of balance of payment. So in that period, there has been a sense that we have this energy issue because our oil and gas is not as many as we thought. So that is the supply side of energy has been one of the issue related to energy sector, and it has happening just after the crisis. Now, Indonesian energy intensity is basically improving, yeah. But one thing to note, it does not improve as good as what happened in China. So this is an improvement in China, take it for 100. And Indonesian energy is improving, but it's still certainly separated from the ability of Chinese or Vietnam, in this case, in improving their energy intensity, including compared with the Philippines. So that is the other aspect of energy security that has been happening since after the crisis. So what happened is that the main response by the government in the early that period, particularly in 2006, is producing this energy mix strategy. So the energy mix strategy basically to shift Indonesian demand electricity or conversion use of energy from petroleum to some other energy, so declining the contribution of petroleum from 52 to 20% in 2025, and substituted by coal. So coal increased from 20% at the time to 33%, also by renewable, but very small. So that was a period of, we can say it is a coal rush. Yeah. On the background of those policy is there was a coal mining boom due to increasing commodity price. So the thinking is that, well, coal is could be our main energy resources because we have so many coal mining. And remember, in 2005, there is this 10,000 megawatt project, the first project on coal electricities, trying to shift Indonesia energy resources from petroleum to coal. And it has been fixed in 2010 by President Dikti number 4, allowing more renewable, but coal is still the main one. And in 2010, we have this 35,000 megawatt project. A lot of them are coal electricity. So the result of those policies is that, yes, Indonesia able to shift their energy source from petroleum. So this is the use of petroleum for energy sources decline, but that was replaced by an increasing use of coal. So coal is certainly much, much bigger, while gas has been declined. Yes, there is some renewable over here, but their portion are still very small. Those policies, in a way, is effective in terms of providing electricity access. So by 2019, almost 99% of Indonesian households has access to electricity. We are basically able to catching up with some countries in the region, such as China, Thailand, Vietnam, in terms of household have access on electricities. And in 2007, household electricity consumption has been higher than the industry, the consumption of the industrial sector. However, there are other aspects of energy security despite this success. One is that there are still regions with a lot of households without electricity, such as in Papua. The number is still 28%, in Nusa Tenggara Timur, and some other in remote area of Indonesia. The second aspect of this success on and providing electricity or energy to households is that blackout is still a major issue. So electricity quality and reliability has still a major issue. So these are the other issue of energy security. So energy security in Indonesia has been an issue for a while, and the reaction on that has been partly success, but not 100% eliminate the energy security issue in Indonesia. Now, in 2007, Indonesia hosts the COP in Bali. And so global community watched on Indonesia performance related to climate change. And it was revealed at the time that Indonesia was among the top, at the time, the top 5 global CO2 emitters, mainly to deforestation. But even without deforestation, the contribution of Indonesian emission is quite big. And this number has been revised, and the latest number that I have in 2006 still showing Indonesia as the top 10 global emitters. And just comparing emission from fuels, fossil fuel combustion, Indonesia is among the top 10 or 15 CO2 emitters around the world. So this is then the world certainly asks Indonesia what you are going to do with this. So and this is creating the second burden of energy sector in Indonesia, that Indonesia needs to reduce its emission not only from forestry sector, but also from energy sector. And as has been mentioned by Kuki, this energy emission, energy use will keep growing as the country growing. Now, and we can also see that the main driver of Indonesian emission increase is the CO2 emission from coal, and this is from gas, and this is from oil. The main driver of Indonesian emission in the last 20 years has been the coal sector. And that is the implication of energy security, reaction on energy security that we did just after the crisis. So the way that Indonesia needs to handle its energy sector has to tackle both burden, which is resolving the energy security, as well as reducing emission. So based on look at this history, despite the relatively good economic performance, Indonesia energy sector has been experiencing double burdens. Yeah. So improving energy security is still needed, but now mitigation carbon emission is the other objective that need to be fulfilled. Now, our suggestion is that we need to transforming the energy sector to be able to manage these two goals. Yeah, and the way to do it is not only intensify the use of renewable energy, yeah, particularly solar, wind, hydropower, to generate electricity, because electricity is the significant component of Indonesia energy use. And this intensive use of renewable should also accompany by allowing micro power plants such as solar roof, small micro hydro, integrating what we call microgrids into the national grid. Now, the second proposal that we would like to suggest is that not only transformation toward more renewable much faster than we planned, but also integrating the Indonesian energy, particularly the electricity sector, with the region. So physically connecting Indonesian energy distribution network with those in other Southeast Asian countries, or even wider, including countries in Asia and Australia for that matters. And this is true, particularly through electricity cable network, connecting islands through the ocean, and developing one market electricity system or one market energy system. And we thought that this transformation should be conducted sooner to make sure that the energy issue and the climate change issue would not hamper Indonesian economic development that expected to be steadily grow for several more years at the rate that we around 5%. Now, the opportunity for implementing those policies, the transformation using more renewable, as well as integrating the Indonesian energy system in the region. So mostly people are talking only the first item, but we are proposing that we need to talk both items at the same time, not only transformation toward renewable, but integrating in an Indonesian energy sector in the region. Looking at renewable, the opportunity in Indonesia are relatively big, and the use has been relatively small comparing those in the region. So this is Indonesia compared with India, compared by Vietnam, and compared by China in terms of the level of renewable. We are really still very small, and so fast progress in this area seem to be possible. Why India can, why Vietnam can, and why Indonesia cannot? That's certainly an issue that needs to be handled as soon as possible. Now, the other opportunity is Australia interest. Australia has the business people in Australia has the ambition to supply Asia through DC cable connecting South Australia, in which there will be a gigantic wind and solar power plant connecting those power plants to Singapore through Indonesia. So this will be a DC cable. So that is the second opportunity to develop a renewable energy in Indonesia together with connecting Indonesia energy system with the region. The third movement is the movement of East and Southeast Asia supergrid. Yeah. This has been pushed by China, which is basically connecting China until India, Delhi, Mumbai, as well as through Indonesia on the north part of Indonesia, Taipei, Shanghai, and so on, a total of 3,000 kilometer supergrid. Yeah. So that is the second opportunity for Indonesia to secure its energy system, as well as reducing emission from the energy sector. Now, the third phase, which is basically a movement within Indonesia to develop what we call Nusantara supergrid or Indonesia supergrid. One of the main actor in proposing this system is my late friend, Professor Peki Argo Dahono, who has advocated the development of Indonesia supergrid. And this supergrid, with the plan of Australia connecting South Australia to Singapore, and the Asia supergrid, are all connected. However, the key to be able to make this happen, and particularly this is why Professor Dahono is the main actor, is an ability to basically master the power electronic knowledge, because this will be transforming a DC electricity transmission to AC and various DC level. And if we're not good on that, then it creates energy loss, which could be significant, as well as a loss in maintaining equipment. So the lifetime of equipment will be much smaller than if we could be able to do that. So these are the movement that has been happening. And so we thought that the definition of energy transformation in Indonesia should include integrating Indonesian energy system with the region, and that would hopefully resolve both issues at the same time in Indonesia energy security, as well as mitigation carbon emission from energy sector. Now, so to support that idea, I and several friends conduct various activities to see what is the effect on those policies intensify of renewable energy, energy integration, how that would affect the socio-economy of Indonesia, particularly looking at economic growth, poverty alleviation, as well as how good we are in reducing our carbon with that policy. So there are various models. So the first analysis is using social accounting metrics. Yeah. And it's a very typical in our model is that we have this macro model. For some analysis, we use social accounting metrics. And then there is this micro household simulation model, basically allowing the macro model to create an income distribution to be able to measure the effect of policies on inequality as well as poverty. And there is a carbon emission model to be able to model the effect of this policy toward carbon emission. And on the macro side, we use several models. So one is using social accounting metrics. A second is using a computable generative regime only for Indonesia, as well as for ASEAN, in which we simulate several scenarios that ASEAN conducting carbon emission policies together, as well as looking at East Asia region. And it's very typical, so the data come from mainly GTAP, but also household survey from various countries in the region. And mainly the type of simulation is that suppose that there is an increase of 10% energy consumption in Indonesia. What will happen if only Indonesia supply it? What will happen if the region supply it? And what will happen if it was supplied by more renewable electricity in Indonesia? So, and the second set is that how if the government reallocate their expenditure. This is talking about the government financing some activities related to renewable electricity development, as well as activities supporting carbon capture technology in a coal power plant, and see how this performance affect Indonesia carbon emission as well as socioeconomic. And the third set is that Indonesia implement a carbon tax and recycle that carbon tax or expand that carbon tax just business as usual, or in a way reducing uniformly indirect tax across industry, or using that to subsidize the development of renewable power plant, electricity power plant, and or subsidizing household electricity price that come from renewable resources. So those kind of policies that we conducted, and I will just present the summary of those things. Yeah. So lesson from those simulation, and this is just some of them as follow. Related to regional integration. Yeah. Regional integration in general would improve electricity security for Indonesia, because our scenario is regional electricity scenario. So that is almost kind of for sure, because if you need more electricity, it could come from outside the country. Yeah. Now for Indonesia, regional integration potentially reduce carbon emission, because Indonesia doesn't have to produce those electricity using their energy resources, and mainly at the point, all these analyses are short run. Yeah, mainly using coal and oil, and others could be much cleaner, particularly if come from Vietnam or some other region. Yeah. However, this integration would most likely not reduce in the short run the total emission of the region. So it is gas leakage. Yeah. And those who are more having a dirty energy sector would probably benefit in terms of reducing emission. However, regional electricity integration could actually forego the opportunity to grow faster and to alleviate poverty faster compared to business as usual, because you do not have the multiplier effect of your own electricity sector development, because you're using other country when your demand increase. Yeah, so that is related to electricity integration. So for Indonesia, it's beneficial, definitely, because our electricity sector has been relatively dirty. So having this integration would certainly help us both in terms of energy security and reducing emission. Now, renewable electricity, this is one that we would like to emphasize. Per se, so if it is only that one policy, the renewable energy development, yes, it could improve energy security, but might not effectively reducing the growth of carbon emission. For Indonesia, our simulations show that it could actually induce a higher carbon emission through rebound effect. So the growing of renewable electricity in Indonesia induce development in other sector, in which the other sector are fossil-based. The content of fossil-based is quite big, and even that they will consume mostly electricity from fossil-based. So then there is a possibility to get a rebound effect. That probably not true for other countries in which their industrial and electricity are much cleaner. But for Indonesia, per se of pushing renewable energy electricity sector could actually create a rebound effect. Yeah, rebound effect meaning that our carbon emission is actually higher than business as usual. Now, carbon tax on its own might not contribute to improve energy security, but it is effective in reducing the growth of carbon emission from fossil fuel. Yeah, and our simulations show that a dollar ton, although this is not linear, a dollar tax per ton of carbon could lower its carbon emission by approximately 0.3%. So and the current plan is, the law, but that is based on several models that we implement. Most likely it is around that. So if Indonesia would like to reduce its carbon emission from the energy sector by 3% or more, certainly the carbon tax that need to be implemented is actually higher. Now, accompanying renewable electricity development of renewable electricity power plant with carbon tax will be effective, both in terms of providing improving energy security, reducing the emission, but also compensating the effect of carbon tax, which could be actually reducing the economic growth, could be compensated by reallocating or recycling the income from carbon tax through development of renewable. So combining those policies might be effective, or even combining renewable carbon tax with implementing carbon capture in coal plant is also could be a combination that is effective in reducing carbon emission and softening the effect of carbon tax toward the economy. Now, the other component related to recycling carbon tax is that if some of the carbon tax is actually recycled for providing cash to the poor, is actually effective in softening the burden of carbon tax toward the poor, particularly in those in rural area, and potentially reduce poverty faster. So that is my presentation, and hopefully we could engage more in the discussion. Thank you very much, Pak Acho.
Thank you so much, Pak Budy, for the very comprehensive study. Let's now move on to question and answer session. I've seen some questions in the Q&A. One hand up, and then can I invite Rose McLeod, Ken Woods, and Max Sambodo first to ask their questions directly. Rose, are you there?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Okay, Pak, silakan.
Okay. Well, I put a few questions in writing. I guess only the panelists and the host can see it, but let me just sort of read these out for everybody. Just in Kuki's presentation, there was a reference to agreed commitments between the government and the stakeholders, and I wondered who the stakeholders are. I saw something recently in a different context where the stakeholders seem to me to be climate change activists, and it seemed to me they're not really stakeholders. They're people who have an interest in the issue, but they're not really stakeholders. So I'd welcome some clarification as to who the stakeholders are there. Also in Kuki's presentation, I noticed, I think I saw in one of the stages of commitments, I think it was the third stage, I think, just looking at it very quickly, there was a reference to extra supply of energy coming from batteries. And I'd simply point out that batteries are not a source of energy, they're a storage mechanism. To get energy out, you have to put energy in. So I'd welcome some explanation of that point. In Mas Budy's presentation, there was quite considerable emphasis on tying Indonesia's grid into a regional grid for electricity supply. And frankly, I didn't really understand the purpose of this. It doesn't seem to reduce the consumption of energy or the production of carbon dioxide on Indonesia's behalf. You know, you might shift the location of the production of the carbon dioxide, but that doesn't seem to solve the issue that we're supposed to be dealing with. So I'd welcome further clarification of that. And then also in Mas Budy's presentation, one of the scenarios I think that he looked at in his modeling exercise involved, on the one hand, the Indonesian government imposing a carbon tax, but then at the same time subsidizing the consumption of energy by households. And it seemed to me that just seems seems really crazy. I would describe it as chasing a cat chasing its own tail. If you're going to tax the production of something and then subsidize the consumption of that same something, then what have you achieved? So just a few things that I think would benefit from a bit of further explanation or clarification. Thanks, Mas Acho.
Thanks, Pak Ros. Let's go straight to Mbak Kuki, maybe quick response, and then Pak Budy before we take Max's question. Pak Kuki, silakan.
Yeah, please. Thank you, Prof, for your questions. I think you referred to this slide, right?
Yeah.
Yes, that was one of them.
All right. Okay.
Yeah. Two of my points were on that. Yes.
Yeah. All right. Okay. So the first of all, that this roadmap is basically produced by the Ministry of Energy and Mineral Resources as their plan to implement the Indonesia net zero emission in the energy sector by 2060. And as I understand, the stakeholders here is not only it's not climate activists, but the one that are being referred here, including, for example, the PLN, the National Utility Company, and then also other players in both renewable and also from the power plant sites as well. So that's my understanding so far. And it's also including...
But consumers, the general public, don't get a mention as stakeholders?
The process itself, I think, was not directly involving everyone directly, but there are representatives from these consumer association, the electricity consumer associations, something like that, in the process, because the process is also basically within the government, right? So they come up with this plan and the roadmap. And I think your second question is related to this 2031-2035 battery utilization, right? For
yes.
the supply side. Yeah.
Yes.
So yeah, as I understand it, why batteries come to the plan, exactly, it's not as a source of energy, as you said, but it's more to, in a way, to buffer the energy that being generated from this how do you call it, variable renewable energy sources. So for example, if we have the battery, then we can store the energy that was generated during the day, and then we can distribute it after, beyond that producing time. So you are right, it's not as a supplier kind of thing, but it's more to store and then later to support the distribution, so that we can work on the variety of the supply and the demand of the electricity.
And there's no double counting involved there? Because in the same block about talking about supply, we've talked about non-renewables, extra production generation of electricity there, and then what you've just said is some of that is going to go into batteries and come back again. I'm just worried that things are being double counted there.
Okay. I need to check with that with the ministry, because it's coming from the ministry. But my understanding is the message here is this is something that I forgot, Mas Acho, if I can share a bit here also, that basically there are some discussion on the coal power plant, right? So Indonesia is committed to only build the one that already in contract. So the one that already have the PPA that will be built. But then as Pak Budy mentioned earlier, also we have this 35 gigawatt program. So it's only that part that already contracted, that already have the PPA that will be built. But then the rest will be converted to renewable. And with that, then we expected some years before 2060, we won't have coal fired power plant in the system any longer.
Right.
So thank you.
Thanks, Mbak Kuki. Mas Budy?
Yeah, thank you, Acho, and thank you, Paros, for the question. So before I answer the question, I would like to mention that consumption of energy is probably a must for growing. So it is not really the main sin. But related to climate change, there are three things that we need to consider when we consume energy. One is efficiency. Second is that your source of energy, because not all source of energy are actually emit the same level of pollution. So coal is in general has been seen as the most dirty source of energy, but solar cell or wind almost do not emit emissions. So that type of energy source is important. And the third aspect is technology. Even the same coal that you use could produce different emission depending on how critical your technology, or there are supercritical coal power generation, and it could actually emit different. So that is that principle. And so we look at why we would like to integrate, and on why the idea of integrating could actually reduce the emission. So the base is that Indonesia electricity sector is relatively dirty, because the main bulk of Indonesia electricity comes from coal and oil, which is the first and the second most dirtiest. So if we connect with the region and hoping that the region could be able to develop their renewable energy faster than us, that means per unit of electricity that they produce, they emit less emission than if that unit produced by us. So by allowing this integration, mean that yes, there will be a leakage, but it will be a small leakage comparing if we actually produce those electricity. So that is the main idea of energy integration in terms of climate change. But in terms of security, you certainly could see that if it is cheaper produced in China for electricity, then it is probably better to receive those electricity from China. So that is the first why we would like to think that energy integration is important, both in terms of energy security as well as carbon emission. On why we would like to have carbon tax and then subsidy. So the one that we subsidize in the demand side is if households use their energy from a clean energy. So this is, in Australia, is at the moment in ACT, there is subsidy if you are actually putting up a solar panel. Yeah. So those kind of, and not only that, ACT government provide a zero interest rate if you change your electricity in your house to solar roof. Yeah. And so that thing is we would like to do, so to shift the consumption of energy from dirty energy to clean energy. So that is the main idea. So it's not just subsidizing all energy, but a specific type of energy. So then there is a restructure within energy system in Indonesia. You know, so that is the main idea, and it is actually used by a lot of other countries, their strategy. Thank you.
Thank you, Mas Budy. Next is Max.
Okay. Thank you, Pak Acho, for this opportunity, and thank you, Ibu Kuki and Pak Budy for very, very interesting presentation. I have some question regarding the role of private sectors in investing on renewable energy. If we see since the last 10 years, it seems that private sector is very eager to develop renewable energy compared with PLN. Although we consider maybe the regulation not so interesting for them, yeah, but they are still eager to do a lot of investment compared with PLN. How do you see this kind of eagerness from the private sectors, and how government need to respond on their intentions, such as kind of possibility to further reform electricity sector by unbundling some tasks and then make it more competitive and more player come in the market? Do you see this kind of opportunity will help Indonesia in pursuing more progressive target on renewable energy? That's my first question. And then I also see that now producer and consumer, they are kind of very attractive, because government really supportive in giving a lot of incentive for PV rooftop investment. And if this is the case and the number will growing for producer and prosumers, do you also take this kind of the opportunity for doing more further reforms, such as in the selling area, which is now under monopolized PLN? And then another issue is about actually how attractive carbon tax policy from the private renewable energy producers, such as in terms of price parity with fossil based, such as coal and so on. And finally, this is actually my comment to Pak Budy regarding the I agree that ASEAN energy market integration is very important and will provide a lot of opportunity, increasing a share of renewable energy. But if we see in the case of West Kalimantan, where power trading Indonesia and Malaysia has been done for many years, it seems now is in declining the intensity of trade, because many new steam coal power plant constructed in West Kalimantan. So in my opinion, it's quite ambiguous. Maybe Indonesia think this is harga diri, kind of national approach. But this is kind of inconsistent attitude that because we buy from renewable energy, from hydro, and this is good and so on. But I don't know why government it's come to like an unpopular situation due to kind of national approach. On the other side, we promote another channel between Indonesia and Singapore. We are now connecting Indonesia and Singapore for renewable, but the existing Indonesia and Malaysia is not well developed from Indonesian side. This is just my comment regarding the Indonesian Malaysian ASEAN grid in West Kalimantan. Thank you so much for the opportunity and the answer. Thank you.
Thanks, Max. Mas Budy, can we start with you?
Yes. Thank you, Max, for the presentation. So, although Mbak Kuki probably will be able to talk more detail on private sector, but if I follow my friends' thought about this Indonesia super grid, so this is the thought of Peki Argo Dahono. The key things is actually a private sector, but it doesn't mean domestic private sector, because in his view, by 2050 and a little bit more above, our coal reserve wouldn't be able to supply our energy. Our oil reserve wouldn't be able to supply. The only way we have to go is renewable energy. So that is his view. And if you look at what happened right now, as you mentioned, the attitude in Indonesian government, the key thing over there is actually how to, in a way, dismantling the national electricity company and allowing more private to be able to produce and connect to the main grid. So these are all combination of microgrid that have been developed by a private sector and allowing PLN probably control the main supergrid. Even in the supergrid, my late friends argue that we should allow DC cable between big island privatized. So because then there will be much more efficient to do that, and we do not have to use government money. However, he also argued that it doesn't have to be domestic private sector. Now, the key thing for Indonesia is that it doesn't have to be a domestic private sector. Now, how Indonesian government will react to that is the key thing. And you also mentioned about the case in Kalimantan. So the problem of when we talk about energy security domestically in Indonesia, it is like sovereignty issue. Now that is creating a problem. It is not about energy supply, cheap energy reliability, but it's a sovereignty issue. So that's the other thing that we need to disentangle besides the role of state-owned enterprise in this energy network, particularly in electricity, because at the moment, probably the national electricity company, the one that not really eager for this transformation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mas Budy. Mbak Kuki, do you have something to add to that?
Yeah, I think Pak Max asked also about at least my views, yeah, Pak Max, yeah, on the unbundling and all this issue, basically to not having the monopoly system of electricity in Indonesia. And I think the answer, yes, we need to do that, because otherwise, if everything is only let's say monopolized by PLN, then it might not be profiting for them. It might be more burden with the current situation, like what happened with a couple of weeks ago when the coal prices is up. And we have issues also, even as one of the biggest coal producing countries, we have an issue of supply of coal for coal-fired plants. So indeed, and in a way, it's already happening now, right? You also mentioned, Pak Max, that the prosumers is there now. It's there already. We have this rooftop solar PV. Minister regulation on rooftop solar PV, on how the export-import between the producer means the household and the grid system and so on. It's already there. So I think eventually we need to tackle this issue and to work on more decentralized system. And I think this is also to respond on the other point that I raised earlier on access and also to address the energy poverty area. It will be difficult to have like centralized and on-grid system. So we need also to rely on more, let's say, microgrid one. And on the carbon tax issue, I think we need to talk beyond carbon tax, because the current regulation that we have on carbon tax under the law number 7 2021 on harmonization of taxation regulation, it's only there. It indicates that Indonesia would like to implement carbon tax, and there are still homework to be done, including like the roadmap on what type of instrument that to be implemented when and on what sectors. But there is also another presidential regulation number 98 2021 that talking about overall carbon pricing instrument in Indonesia, both for domestic and international one. So I think this is where the issue of I mentioned earlier, internalizing the externalities can be addressed, and if this can happen, and especially talking in the energy sector, then the role of renewable will be bigger, and they can supply the offset for such market. So thank you, Mas Ajo.
Thank you, Mbak Kuki. In the interest of time, I will take some questions at once. So I appreciate if those who ask questions can ask just simple and straightforward questions. And I'll take Brett Mades, Hakimul Bati, and Peter Macaulay. I'll start with Brett Mades.
Thank you. Yeah, I have two questions actually, and I'll ask them quickly for Pak Budy. The first is about the rebound effect. I think it was in the last slide that you showed, whereby introduction of renewable energy technologies could potentially lead to higher emissions. I've heard this argument before, and I don't understand it. It tends to be used, I think, by apologists for the fossil fuels industry, of which I am one, I hasten to add. I firmly believe that gas has a crucial role to play in Indonesia's energy transition, but I still don't understand this rebound effect. So that's my first question. The second is about the value or the cost rather of carbon capture and storage in your modelling. I see CCS and CCUS used as a sort of throwaway line for helping decarbonisation over the next couple of decades. But the reality is that at the moment it's expensive. I've just been looking at abatement options, cost of abatement options for a coal-fired power generator here in the last month or two. And, you know, CCS is hostage to a number of things, including geography and geology. And the cost for that particular generator would be literally an order of magnitude, the cost per tonne of carbon abated, an order of magnitude higher than your $10 a tonne for carbon. So 2 questions. 1, the rebound effect, and 2, how do you model CCS?
Thanks, Brad. Hakimul?
Thank you, Mas Acho. Congratulations, Pak Budy, for the very interesting study. Just one simple question for me about the in one scenario you mentioning that regional electricity integration will increase the energy security. Some of energy security concept, for example, from National Energy Council, then the energy security is include import dependency as one of energy security indicator. What is your view on this? Maybe before you already mentioning about the sovereignty, by the including this energy security indicator, regional electricity integration, maybe it will potentially reduce the energy security. Thank you, Pak.
Thank you, Hakim. Peter?
Terima kasih. Can you hear me, Pak Acho?
Yes, Pak.
Yeah, okay. I've had an interest in electricity for a long time, 50 tahun, but I'll just have a couple of questions, I guess. As I see it, in this whole discussion, this is a question about objectives. And as I see it, there is one group of people who often take the objective of supporting the energy transition in the region and in Indonesia. But as I see it, there is a second objective which we need to have up front as well. And my question really is, do we agree that there are 2 objectives or is there just one? The second objective, the objective that seems to me important, is a quantity one of dramatically increasing the amount of electricity, both in Indonesia and the region. In OECD countries, in Australia, level of consumption is around 10,000 kilowatt hours per person per year. Every Australian on average, this is total. In Indonesia, the figure is still 1,000. Philippines is 1,000. India is 1,000. And a number of other countries in the region are lower. So
what's Australia, Pak?
10,000 kilowatt hours per capita. And that's roughly the average for OECD, as a matter of fact. It varies, of course, but roughly rich countries have 10,000. Indonesia, India, Philippines are around 1,000. Now, so I am suggesting that really in all of our discussion, we really need to focus on 2 objectives, not one. And so it's difficult. So my real question is, mohon komentar from Ibu Kuki, Pak Budy. And by the way, may I say hello to Max Sambodo. Good to hear, Max. But can I have just a comment from Ibu Kuki and Pak Budy about the objectives? What are we, the basic thing, what are we trying to do? Looking ahead 10 or 15 years, what are our goals?
Okay, thanks, Pak.
Terima kasih.
Thank you, Pak Peter. Mas Budy?
Yes, thank you for the question, Brad. So the problem is that Indonesia electricity is so dirty. So if we actually develop the renewable, that actually creates an expansion of the other industry, and the other industry still mainly will take electricity from the traditional electricity sector, then it actually also induce a higher production of the traditional electricity sector, and then create this issue of rebound. But this is no. So it is important if the composition of energy in a country different is much smaller. So from our exercise is that Indonesia got a rebound effect, but some other country like I don't think Philippines and well, Singapore do not have a rebound effect because it's already clean energy. So when there is a spillover effect, those industries actually using clean energy anyway. So that is the issue. And if along the way, if Indonesia composition energy has been changed, this rebound effect might be gone. Yeah. But as I mentioned, our analysis is looking at the short run. And that's what we predict in the short run. But then after that, if we pass a certain level, a certain energy composition, then we could be basically okay. Remember that Indonesian electricity from renewable is very small, very tiny. And gas is also not that big. Yeah. So that is why. Now on CCF cost, now this is the one that good to be debated. So the cost that we take, and if the cost has been different, will be different as well. So we are actually looking at the cost of CCF per kilowatt in China, assuming that we could actually buy everything, those technology from China. And the $1 is not going to basically put CCF in the whole Indonesia, in the whole coal power plant, but only some of the power plant. So that is what the scenario, and it could be sensitive toward the cost. So if it turns out that the cost that when we look at China is not the global cost, then it could be different. So the point is that it could be reducing CO2, but it could be also costly. Yeah. So that is one thing that we learned, and it is not our main recommendation. Second is on the energy security as interdependency. Now that is not part. So interdependency of energy is okay. We depend with other country depend with us is okay. But a lot of this discussion of energy security is on self-sufficiency on energy, which is that is the part that I don't think we need it. But if we are depending with our region and our region depending on us, that is still okay. So within this definition of energy security, I certainly probably have some different view with the way that the Indonesian government define energy security. But my energy security is probably closer to the usual definition of food security: supply, cheap price, reliability, and sustainability. And for Peter, I don't really have a comment. Well, I agree that Indonesia should think that the electricity use per capita should be increasing. That is the path that Indonesia should predict. So that is why moving toward energy transportation as soon as possible is important, because our trajectory on using energy per capita is still very small. It's still very small. So in the future, we will get like 10 times of this. And imagine if we are not doing transformation, how big is our carbon from energy sector? So yes, agree that the objective should have both providing energy cheap, available, and so on. But at the same time, we need to taking care of our energy sector. So energy transformation is the key. Thank you. Sorry.
Thank you, Mas Budy. Sorry. Now, I think Mbak Kuki can respond also to Pak Peter's question, but in a given time, let's listen to one last question from Mbak Afi.
Hai, terima kasih Pak Budy dan Mbak Kuki sudah memberikan iluminasi terhadap situasi update energy. I have very quick questions on the relevance of the carbon pricing regulations and how that would bring us closer. One is generally to the emission reduction, but most importantly, I think is how we're going to phase out coal from our system and shifting much closer to the renewable energy as the President Jokowi has already pledged during the COP26. Thank you.
Thank you, Mbak Afi. And I can also link that to a question from Richard Borsuk asking about the coal lobby in Indonesia. It's very strong, and can there be real reform in the energy sector given this coal lobby being very strong and with PLN wanting to protect its monopoly? So over to Mbak Kuki first. Thanks.
All right. Yeah. Thanks so much for all the difficult questions. But I'll try to respond to it. First of all, to Pak Peter, of course, Pak, I think both objectives are important. And as I mentioned earlier, one of the main objective, of course, the energy security, which I think it's also aligned with what you mentioned, like the energy consumption per capita. But I think as a country that start to increase their energy consumption, we need to, from the very beginning, need to already understand and implement the energy efficiency part of it, so that we can decoupling both, right? We can decoupling the economic development and energy consumption, but also with the emission, greenhouse gases emission. So both are important, and I'm sure that Indonesia would like to achieve both as well. And to respond to Mbak Afi, terima kasih Mbak Afi. I think with the I mentioned briefly earlier, but with the current PERPRES, the presidential regulation, as well as the new law on harmonization of taxation regulation, the one that will be implemented soon is in the electricity sector, focusing on coal-fired power plant. And for this, this is exactly to address two issues, right? On the one hand, to reduce the emission from the coal power sector, but eventually this will, in a way of, if I can say, force the coal-fired power plant to reconsider whether they would like to continue their business or to stop. But anyway, talking about the coal-fired plant, then we already have the plan that I mentioned earlier. But in that particular sector, what's happening now, it's still in the discussion, and as per the law itself, it will be implemented starting from 1st of April this year. But what happened is that those coal-fired power plant will be assigned like how do you call it, a cap, and then there will be kind of allowance. So it's more like an emission trading scheme. So there will be given allowances to emit. So if they emit beyond that allowances, then they need to either buy offset or buy other allowances from other players within the system, or buying offset which come from renewable energy development developers. And then the third possibility, if those two are still not enough, then they need to pay kind of tax, kind of penalty, and they call it this carbon tax for the first term. So that would be my response. And on the coal lobby, at least up to now, as I mentioned earlier, the plan is not only from the Ministry of Energy and Mineral Resources, but it's also coming from PLN. So I think that in a way show how at least the intention so far. Yeah. Thank you, Mas Ajo.
Thank you, Mbak Kuki. Mas Budy, you have last words?
No.
No? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, with that, our time is up. Our guests have been Pak Budy Resosudarmo from ANU, and Ibu Kuki Soejachmoen from Indonesia Research Institute for Decarbonization. Thank you so much for your insights and also information. I also thank all the participants. I'm sorry if your questions did not get picked up this time because of time limitation. And I'd like to mention also that tomorrow we will have the special Indonesia study group virtually at 1 p.m. Australian Eastern Time. That's 10 in Jakarta, 9 Jakarta time, and that is the research travel grants awardees presentation. And we will have Samira Lindsay from Monash University talking about corporate criminal liability in Indonesia and Australia, and Archana Ramesh from the University of Melbourne talking about co-production of place as a means to counter displacement in the case of Bandung, Indonesia. So thank you again so much, and I hope to see many of you tomorrow. Thank you, and over to Nuka.
Thank you, Acho. And with that, we conclude in the Global Seminar number 40, and I will switch it off. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Mbak Kuki, Mas Budy.